Vikes now, Dustin Baker. Welcome to February. We're in the next month of the offseason. The Vikings offseason began way too damn prematurely. Nothing we can do about it now. Josh, how are you? Oh my gosh, you're that's a bad omen. The Bucks are losing their next game. Oh my
Oh
goodness.
man.
How are you?
Yeah, that's
Besides
what
that, how are you?
I'm good. I guess that's what I get for hastily trying to hang things up right before we record an episode. But it's whatever. I'll fix it later.
All right. Well, not a good omen for the 2022-2023 Bucks. We shall see. That was Giannis in the background that fell off of his wall for anybody curious. All right, sir. Most of us woke up this morning to some goat shit. Tom Brady, alas, is actually retiring. There won't be, well, barring a complete change of heart, he isn't coming back this time. Very heartfelt goodbye. I don't need you to eulogize Brady's career because everybody else will do that. I want to tell you, if at all, how does that affect the landscape of the NFC?
So I think it affects it a lot, honestly. I think now we're looking at an NFC South division that has absolutely nobody starting at quarterback right now. I think the Saints have everybody going into free agency. Who knows what Atlanta's going to do, whether they bring back Mariota or they go with Ritter, who started only 4 games this year and didn't look spectacular, but guess he was decent enough. And then Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
they've got Frank Reich and all the things going on over there too. Matt Corral, Darnold, Mayfield, all that situation. So that division just looks absolutely it's not going to be very good in 2023, I don't think. And then we're now up to, I guess you could say, 8 teams if you want to toss in the Vikings in the NFC that could go in different directions at quarterback this year. Like, and Tom Brady was one of the guys, like, between the Vikings rumors that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't believe for one bit, but then San Francisco, who knows what happens there anymore. But yeah, that's 8 teams that you could say need quarterbacks going into 2023 or could need quarterbacks going into 2023. And one of them's off the board now. So I think this is just going to be a fascinating offseason to watch what goes on in this conference. Because one, like, the power continues to tilt towards the AFC and towards a QB talent. And there's very little options in terms of NFC QBs anymore, especially if Rodgers gets dealt too.
Yeah, overwhelmingly, because now looking back in the last 3 years, you will have lost Drew Brees, certainly Tom Brady, and then Rodgers if he goes elsewhere. That is 3 Hall of Famers that are whisked away from the sport or from the conference, which is wild. I was always drawn to Brady. I don't know if I've talked about this on this show because when I was in my 20s, it was always so weird to me that people debated Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady because to me, and per the numbers, Peyton Manning always flopped when the postseason hit. He's the best regular season quarterback of all time. But even in his 2006 Super Bowl run with the Colts, in those 4 games, he threw 3 touchdowns to 7 picks. The Bob Sanders defense carried it. And then, beyond the shadow of a doubt, in 2015, he was shitty. That he played like Trent Dilfer that entire season, entire playoffs. But he has his 2 Super Bowl rings, and it always seemed like Brady shined when the playoffs started, and Manning did the opposite. So I liked Brady because I defended him so much. I could never understand the logic of like, why do we debate this? Like they're great quarterbacks, but there's one who's just on this shining hill. And to me, that was Brady. All right. So NFC weekends, especially if Brady wasn't washed, we'll never know. He'll probably end up in the booth. And I think he signed last year like a massive deal with Fox or somebody. Like
Yeah,
for
it's like 10 years with
yeah.
Fox. Yeah,
So
it's
we're
crazy.
like we're guaranteed like 20 or 30 to 35 years of Tom Brady in our football lives, which is pretty awesome. All right, the Viking stuff. You, sir, personally wrote an article titled 5 Ways the Vikings Can Approach the Quarterback Position This Offseason, which is fine and dandy. I'm glad you provided all the perspective, but I want to know, what do you want to happen if you were orchestrating this at quarterback?
Well, I think the most fun option is obviously trading Kirk somewhere and going and maybe trying to find somebody in the draft or making a trade for somebody like a Trey Lance or a Jordan Love, like we talked about last week. But
Mm-hmm.
I do ultimately think the most realistic option is just sticking with Kirk for at least one more year. It seems super premature to try to move off of him this early. And I guess you can't say this early when it's 5 years now in the running. But I'm not super convinced by any of the options going into 2023 outside of Kirk. Like maybe Trey Lance is good, maybe Jordan Love is good, but we just haven't seen them do anything yet to know anything about them. And maybe that means that they could get them at a cheaper price tag, and maybe they could get some extra picks out of those trades. But one, you have to make sure that Kirk actually wants to go to one of those teams
Mm-hmm.
because he has the no trade clause. And two, I don't understand why you try to trade a seasoned veteran within the conference. To especially two of the playoff contenders that are probably going to be around in 2023. Like Kyle Shanahan damn near took the 49ers to the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. And they might have if Brock Purdy hadn't torn his UCL. So I don't I'm not super convinced by anybody other than Kirk going into 2023. And like the draft, we've talked about that a lot. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a lot of developmental guys, but nobody that you can say in 2023 is a sure thing to be a good starter on a playoff team. And when you're trying to convince Justin Jefferson to stick around long term, I I'm not really, I don't know what kind of message you would send to trade away a veteran quarterback to go get an unproven guy and after going 13-4. And now you have to try to convince him to stay 5, 6 extra years in Minnesota after he just finally got into the playoffs for the first time and was bounced right away.
Yeah, I said all offseason that you want to make sure you get Jefferson to the playoffs, but then you almost scripted one of the worst playoff scripts you could have, losing at home because your defense sucked. Nothing Jefferson could do about it. So, I mean, it wasn't, like the Giants 20 years ago in the NFC Championship, but it was like, it's not quite what I meant, fellas, when I said get to the postseason. I meant, defend your home court, then go lose the 49ers. And the thing that's interesting that you said about the 49ers is, yeah, there's the pizzazz, whether it's driven by Score North or the masses that says, yeah, let's trade Kirk to San Francisco and start fresh with our new guy. But to your point, you'd be giving a team that is this close to the Super Bowl and perhaps Super Bowl win the most durable quarterback in football. And do
Yeah.
you want to hand the NFC on a platter, especially Kwesi, who used to work there, and say, all right, guys, you go ahead. We're in the same conference. You go win the Super Bowl. We know this guy doesn't get hurt, and this is all you need. Here you go. And it sounds weird talking about Cousins like that because it sounds like you're talking about like LeBron, like, oh, that's all they need, and they'll go win a Super Bowl. But realistically,
That's
they
that's
showed that
just how good
really,
they are.
yeah,
Yeah.
they just need a durable quarterback who, by the way, throws 30 touchdowns like clockwork and 4,200 yards. So, all right. You messaged me earlier this week, or maybe it was this weekend, almost in shame. You said, oh, God, I'm talking myself into Bijan. Is that how you say it? Bijan?
Bijan. Yeah.
Bijan Robinson. And the big naughty thing is to draft a running back early, to pay a running back a lot of money in the world of analytics. But you said I kind of like him. So tell me how you got there, and if he's there at 23, should the Vikings pounce for the best player available?
So first, if we're talking about just pure fun, I think an offense with both Bijan Robinson and Justin Jefferson in it, like we're talking about the best wide receiver in the league and a guy that is going to come into the NFL in Robinson and immediately be one of the top 10 best running backs in the entire NFL. Like this dude, he's not going to go nearly as high as Saquon did, and rightfully so because the running back position is just that devalued, and there's just a lot of guys in free agency that you can just plug and play
Yeah.
for a year and then let them go. But Robinson is just he's a bigger Saquon. Like he can do just about anything. Like he runs through the tackles very well. He can shed block. He can shed tacklers. He breaks so many tackles at Texas, and he's honestly a pretty damn good receiver out of the backfield too. I think he got 31 passes this year or maybe it wasn't 31. I might be mixing that up, but he can catch the ball out of the backfield, and that's something that we thought Dalvin Cook was going to do more this year, and he just didn't do it.
No.
Whether it was between scheme or just he just doesn't have quite that type of skill set to be able to do that consistently. But that's a guy that in Robinson that you definitely could do, and I understand not wanting to draft a running back in the first round, especially if it's a guy that's like maybe just got some good potential. But this is a dude that you get him on a rookie contract for 4 years, and he's going to be one of the best running backs in the NFL. So just from a pure value standpoint, I think it'd be worth it just for that if he's there. I don't necessarily know if I do it. I get like I mentioned this last week. I'm really glad that I'm not part of this front office that has to make these decisions this offseason because there's so many that have to be made. But I don't think we should count out the fact that Bijan Robinson could be a Viking in 2023 just because he'd make the offense that much more explosive. A rushing offense that basically across the board ranked among the bottom 5 in the entire league. Again, maybe that's just part of scheme, or maybe that's because they don't have enough talent, but I think they could be a lot more balanced with Robinson on the backfield, and I don't think we should be upset if the Vikings end up drafting him there.
So the Vikings chose not to run the football very much, the third least in the NFL, and when they did run, they weren't very good at it. So it was like this negative double combo platter of nastiness that they weren't very efficient. So on Robinson, I guess I think it would be a thing where, yeah, you're not supposed to draft running back in the first round. However, fans for a night would be like, son of a bitch, I can't believe we did this. And then come September, everybody be like, all right, now we got another weapon. I think people would warm up to it. And I look back at my own past. When I was 23, the Vikings employed Chester Taylor, who had just rushed for 1,000 yards. And then they drafted Adrian Peterson. And for that whole summer, I was like, oh, yay, 2 running backs. And I just didn't know how game-changing Peterson was. So I use that cautionary tale that, if he's Peterson-esque, how would you not, in retrospect, add that to an offense that is already pretty damn good? And the last tidbit on Robinson, if you're starting a dynasty fantasy league this year, I think
he's number 1.
Yeah,
he's first overall.
Yeah. And think about the gravity of that. That's pretty weird. Jefferson's probably 2 or 3, and then depending on if you have super flex 2 quarterbacks, you might splurge early. But Derrick Henry's getting old. Christian McCaffrey's getting old. Ezekiel Elliott is basically a shell of himself. Jonathan Taylor took a step back. So yeah, that is how, if you care about fantasy, how coveted this dude is. That starting a dynasty, he's probably the number 1 overall pick. All right, a pivot to the rookie talk. This week is the Senior Bowl. We had Zapruder pictures of Brian Flores talking to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Let's hope, I guess, he doesn't get hired for the Cardinals because it seems like that's the only thing holding this thing back, and probably why it's been so quiet on the DC defensive coordinator front. But tell me, Senior Bowl players to watch for the Vikings. Any stand out for you that you want to mention on Vikes Now?
Yeah, so I think there are a few. I've got the measurements pulled up for them, so I'll go through those really quick. First and foremost, Tank Dell, the wide receiver out of Houston. He's nicknamed Tank. Actual name is Nathaniel, but he's super small. 5'8", 163 is what he measured in at. And you're going to look at that and immediately think that he's going to be a bust in the NFL. He can't do anything. He's not going to be able to handle the bigger guys. But this dude has just incredible speed, and his route running ability is awesome. Like he can stop on a dime. He can run pretty much any route that you ask him to. And pairing him with Justin Jefferson, I think that could be a huge boost to the Vikings offense as well. And I think he's going to be available in day 2. So if they go after him round 3, I think that's super great value for the Vikings to get another wide receiver to pair with Jefferson. And then if you want to go to the defensive side, there's Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami. 6 foot, 204 is what he measured in at. He's got great length, wingspan of 77 inches. And he's just a super physical corner. And that's something that I think the Vikings definitely could use. And if Andrew Booth ends up being anything that they can use as a starter next year, those 2 guys in the secondary together would be a lot of fun, I think. Just those 2 guys bullying guys at the line of scrimmage. And if specifically for Minnesota fans, offensive line, might as well look at John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota, the Gophers center. He measured in 6'3", 306. Not the biggest guy in the world at center, but he's very good at both run blocking and pass blocking. He had some very great reps during the drills yesterday, and I'm looking forward to seeing him again today and throughout the rest of the week. But yeah, those are 3 guys that I think are definitely worth keeping an eye on. Another one that I think is just a fun story is Cody Mauch out of North Dakota State. He's the FCS darling this year. That school always has pretty much on a yearly basis somebody that ends up going high in the draft, and I think he's that guy this year. 6'4", 305. Played tackle at NDSU throughout his college career, but he trends more towards being a guard just because of his size at the NFL. But he had some really good reps in one-on-ones yesterday as well. And he's a guy to definitely keep an eye on. So yeah, those are 4 guys that right off the bat, pretty much everybody at this field is going to be worth keeping an eye on just because it's a Senior Bowl. These are all going to be guys that are names that come up during the NFL draft. So yeah.
On the center conversation, one thing I want to call out to viewers is, so we had this mini renaissance with Garrett Bradbury where he didn't suck anymore. And that was like cause for a parade. We're like, wow, yeah, we got it right. This guy's pretty good. But I caution going into free agency, just because the guy wasn't shitty anymore, is he worth $8 to $11 million
Right.
per season? And if the answer is no, then boom, you can draft where the rest of the world does, draft a center, not in the first round, and probably thrive for 4 years on a rookie deal. So, I mean, I'd be fine if Bradbury's back, and I'm sure he'll be just fine, just decent like he was. But I want to make sure that we don't mistake our excitement about Bradbury for him being elite or anything, because he wasn't. He just wasn't awful anymore. And I think that was like, build the statue, because he's not the butt of the jokes anymore. And then on the wide receiver talk, interestingly, for some reason, the Vikings haven't drafted a wide receiver in rounds 2 or 3 since 2007. They always draft a first rounder, whether it is Laquan Treadwell, Cordero Patterson, Percy Harvin, Justin Jefferson, or they wait until way the hell at the back of the draft. So, and that's usually a gravy train in the second round as of late, where to find wide receivers or even the third. So keep that in mind if they finally break the trend there. Although I think a lot of their picks will be on defense to start the event. All right, I got 2 more questions for you, sir. And this one is about Danielle Hunter. Every offseason for the last 3 or 4, we talk about, all right, what's going to happen with Hunter, because he has been saddled with a Spielman team-friendly special for 5 years now. And per scheduled cap hit for 2023, he's supposed to be the 25th highest paid edge rusher in the business. Now, he suddenly became a very good 3-4 defender after about 5 games of getting his footing. I'm going to guess there's going to be some Hunter kerfuffle as to, all right, what are we going to do with him? Because I don't know if he's going to want to play out this deal on his contract. And truth be told, he should be done just doing the right thing by the team, because his earning power is going to diminish. He's going to be 30 in 2 years. And I want to know your prediction or your desire for Danielle Hunter and the 2023 Vikings.
I think that they're going to offer him an extension this offseason. I think he played well enough that he definitely earned something like that. And even if they do add on some money down the road, if they can lower the cap hit just for this season, I think that would be really big for them, especially looking at they're going to have to extend JJ. They're going to have to extend Darrisaw next season.
Hawkinson.
And Hawkinson, yeah. And they've got so many needs on the defensive side of the ball, especially if they let Za'Darius Smith go, that they're going to need that cap space. I think they're 25 or 27 over the cap right now, in terms of space after the official announcement. So I'd give him the extension. He's earned it. He plays well enough that he warrants something like that, and just to keep him around. He's a steady pass rusher at the very least, if he doesn't have one of those breakout games where he's going for 2-3 sacks against like the Bears or something. So I do think that I think he's worth it. I'd do it. I'm very comfortable with it.
And so you would do it, and you think they will. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what is he, 28 right now? Turned 28 in the fall.
He's 28. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe edge rushers can usually go pretty strong until 32 or so. So yeah, perhaps he gets another 3 or 4 years, because the 2 really glaring things that come when you play around the Vikings salary cap are that Eric Kendricks can be jettisoned for cheap and save a bunch of money, and so can Za'Darius, the way that his deal was structured. And Kendricks is moot when it comes to pass rushing. But if you say, all right, we're trading Danielle Hunter to blah, blah, blah in the AFC, and then we're not going to retain Za'Darius Smith because he went to sleep for the last 5-6 games, then you're like, all right, then what? Patrick Jones, DJ Wanham, and some dude that you draft? You don't want to subtract at the edge rusher position when you're watching football from your sofa in the Super Bowl and you have 2 ferocious defensive lines. You want to get better at that position, and that probably involves retaining a Hunter. I just want to call it out for viewers that I doubt he'll play on this contract. Something will have to happen, because it's a little bit insulting for him to be on this deal for this long. All right, final question. You came to us, the Vikings community, from a Saints background. You lived, I don't know if you grew up, but you lived in Louisiana. And we touched on this about 15 minutes ago. What in the hell will the Saints do at quarterback? Because Taysom Hill probably isn't the long-term guy. Jameis Winston's a free agent, I believe, and Dalton's a free agent. So you should have some intel, at least based on how the Saints have conducted operations for the last couple decades. What will they do at quarterback?
So funny enough, I don't think quarterback was the problem with the Saints last year.
Yeah, it was weird. I think Dalton quietly was pretty good.
Yeah, I think they'd be fine running it back with Dalton. The thing that I'm just super shocked by with them is the fact that they kept Dennis Allen around. Because if it weren't for him in that Tampa Bay game, they would have been in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And his late game situation, his management those down the stretch of those games was just horrendous. And I think that they'd be fine running back with Dalton one more year. Maybe they go after a guy like Hendon Hooker in the draft now that they've got 7 draft picks again.
Yeah.
But I think they'd be fine with Dalton. And then if they stink again this year, it's either they're going to be bad like they were this year, and they're going to go after a guy in the draft next year when there's a lot more high quality players at the quarterback spot, or they're going to be decent and win the division because nobody in the NFC South is going to be very good this year, at least unless something super drastic happens in the next few months. But that's where I'm at. I think it'd be fine with running Andy Dalton back. He played decent, and they've got some skill position guys now that they can work around him. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed were great at the wide receiver spot. And then he's still Alvin Kamara. So that's where that's where I'm at with the Saints. Obviously, I haven't followed them as closely over the past few years, but I think that they'd be comfortable running it back with Andy Dalton.
Interesting. Okay. I figured that because their defense is pretty decent, well, pretty damn good, in fact. I figured that maybe they would explore a Derek Carr thing or a rookie thing because I don't know. It kind of seemed like their ceiling was that 9-8 maybe with Dalton or what everybody thinks Cousins is.
Right. I'd be okay with a Derek Carr trade, but I wouldn't spend like multiple first round picks to get him because I just don't think he improves your offense that much to the point. Like we talked about, Andy Dalton was quietly very good for the Saints. Like he was not the problem. It was injuries again all over the field, and then offensive line wasn't great for them, and it's just management down the stretch of those games. So I personally okay with them running it back with Andy Dalton. Maybe if they can go get Carr for that 29th overall pick or whatever it is, then sure, go do that. But I don't think that he improves you enough to where you're going to be like Super Bowl contender or something like that.
Based on the advanced metrics or analytics, DVOA, EPA, CPOE, Dalton was actually better than Derek Carr. And
exactly.
We just can't say that out loud because everybody thinks Dalton sucks. You probably don't dislike Sean Payton like the rest of us, but do you think he turns around the Broncos?
I do. I think that I think Russell Wilson is the exact quarterback that Sean Payton was looking for after Drew Brees turned 40 and he just wasn't Drew Brees anymore. I think that's what they hoped was going to happen with Taysom Hill, and he just never turned into as good of a passer enough to actually warrant that sort of hype around him. But Russell Wilson, I think I refuse to believe that in like a 3-month span, he just went from one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL to an absolute garbage player. So I really do think that they're going to turn it around this year, and they're going to at least make the playoffs in 2023.
Amen. All right, man. You hang your picture back up, maybe get some super glue or something. Right. And we'll talk next Wednesday. I'm going to guess with a defensive coordinator by then that we can unpack.
I'm gonna agree with you there. I think we'll have something figured out by then.
All right, sir. We'll talk to you in 1 week.
Sounds good. See you
later.